December 1944. The Philippine island of Lubang Tartagod. A 22-year-old Japanese lieutenant steps off a boat and into the jungle. His orders are simple and absolute. Hold the island. Conduct guerrilla operations. Do not surrender. Do not take your own life. It may take 3 years, it may take 5. His commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, told him. But whatever happens will come back for you. He believed that. He trained for it. He was ready. His name was Hiroo Onoda. And Major Taniguchi did come back for him. Just not for 30 years. Lubang Island sits about 150 kilometers southwest of Manila. In December 1944, it was a small piece of a massive war. One of thousands of islands the Japanese military was trying to hold as Allied forces pushed back across the Pacific. Onoda had been singled out early. He had learned guerrilla warfare philosophy, history, martial arts, propaganda, and covert operations. He was not a regular infantry soldier. He was an intelligence officer, trained specifically to operate behind enemy lines, to survive without support, to keep fighting even when everything around him had collapsed. This training would matter more than anyone expected. In February 1945, just 2 months after Onoda arrived, U.S. troops landed on Lubang. Most other Japanese soldiers surrendered immediately. Onoda did not. He had his orders. He took 3 other soldiers with him, Private Yuichi Akatsu, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, and Private First Class Kinshichi Kozuka, and they went deeper into the jungle. They were going to hold the island until Japan called them back. August 1945. The atomic bombs fall on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrenders. Emperor Hirohito delivers his radio address. The first time most Japanese citizens had ever heard his voice, asking the nation to endure the unendurable. World War II is over. On Lubang Island, Hiroo Onoda does not know this. The first time Onoda and his men saw a leaflet announcing that Japan had surrendered was in October 1945. They had killed a cow and found a leaflet left behind by islanders which read, "The war ended on August 15th. Come down from the mountain." They looked at it. They discussed it. They concluded it was enemy propaganda. Think about that for a moment. Onoda was a trained intelligence officer. He had been specifically taught that the enemy would use psychological operations, fake documents, false radio broadcasts, manufactured surrender orders, to break the will of Japanese soldiers. Part of his training was learning to distrust exactly this kind of information. They mistrusted the leaflet. They concluded that the leaflet was Allied propaganda, and also believed that they would not have been fired on if the war had indeed been over. The logic is impeccable, from inside the frame of reference he'd been given. If the war were really over, why were local police still shooting at them when they came down for supplies? Because local police were still shooting at them. Because they were raiding villages, burning crops, stealing rice and cattle to survive. The shooting confirmed the war. The war justified the shooting. Closed loop, perfectly self-reinforcing. Over the years, more leaflets came. Newspapers. Photographs of Japan rebuilding. Even personal letters from Onoda's own family, telling him the war was over, telling him to come home. He read the family letters. He concluded they were forgeries. He was not stupid. He was not delusional. He was doing exactly what his training had prepared him to do. Distrust all information that contradicted his mission until he received official orders from a superior officer. The problem was that no superior officer came. For the first few years there were 4 of them. Private Yuichi Akatsu was the first to leave. One emerged from the jungle in 1950 after deciding on his own that the war must be over. He simply walked out. Onoda watched him go and concluded he had been captured, perhaps tortured into surrender by enemy forces. Katsu tried to tell him otherwise. Onoda did not believe him. Then there were three. Corporal Shimada was shot in the leg during a shootout with local fishermen in June 1953, after which Onoda nursed him back to health. On May 7, 1954, Shimada was killed by a shot fired by a search party looking for the men. Then there were two, Onoda and Kozuka. For 18 more years, the two of them kept fighting, raiding villages, burning rice supplies they believed were feeding enemy forces, evading search parties, maintaining the mission. In 1972, his last ally, Private First Class Kinshichi Kozuka, was killed by police while the two of them were burning a village's rice silo. Now there was one man, one rifle, one mission, on an island where the war had been over for 27 years. This is the part the story usually skips. During those years, he continued to battle with villagers. As many as 30 people were killed. These were not soldiers. They were Filipino civilians, farmers, fishermen, ordinary people trying to live on the same island as a man who believed he was at war with them. People who had no idea that the man shooting at them was fighting a war that their grandparents had seen end. Onoda knew there was a cost. He didn't enjoy it. But in his framework, these people were collaborators, helping the enemy, betraying their island to occupying forces. In his framework, what he was doing was not murder. It was military necessity. He was wrong. But he didn't know he was wrong. And there is a difference, morally, psychologically, between a man who knows he is doing wrong and does it anyway, and a man who believes completely in a reality that does not exist. Onoda believed completely. For 29 years. By 1974, Onoda's story had become big news in Japan. He had been officially declared dead in 1959. Then Kozuka's death in 1972 proved he was still alive, because Onoda had been there when Kozuka died. A Japanese government search mission was organized. Onoda's family went to the island. They left letters, photographs, recorded messages. They called into the jungle. Nothing. Then, a 24-year-old Japanese college dropout named Norio Suzuki decided he was going to find Hiroo Onoda. Suzuki said he wanted to see Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman in that order. This was his actual stated goal. He ranked a 29-year military holdout, a rare bear, and a cryptid as equally achievable targets. He flew to the Philippines. He went to Lubang. He set up a small camp in the jungle, alone, in the places he had read Onoda might be. Suzuki quietly pitched camp in lonely jungle clearings and waited. Incredibly, he managed to track Onoda down just 4 days after beginning his search. 4 days. After government search parties, military missions, family visits, and official announcements had all failed for years, a 24-year-old adventurer with no military training found him in 4 days. When Onoda was first discovered, he was ready to shoot Suzuki at first sight, but fortunately, Suzuki had read all about the fugitive and quickly said, "Onoda-san, the Emperor and the people of Japan are worried about you." Onoda stopped. He listened. The two men talked. The pair formed a friendship, but Onoda told Suzuki he would not surrender unless he received official orders. He was 52 years old. He had spent 29 years in the jungle. He had lost 3 comrades. He had fought alone for 2 years after Kozuka died. And his answer to the first Japanese person who found him was, "I need official orders from my superior officer before I can stand down." The training held. After 29 years, the training still held. Suzuki returned to Japan with photographs proving the encounter. The Japanese government went to work finding Major Yoshimi Taniguchi. Taniguchi had since become a bookseller. The man who had sent Hiroo Onoda into the jungle in 1944, the man who had promised to come back for him, had been living a quiet civilian life, selling books, while his soldier waited in the jungle for 3 decades. He was located. He agreed to go. On March 9, 1974, at the age of 52, Hiroo Onoda emerged from the jungle, still dressed in his tattered official uniform, and with his service rifle and sword still in excellent shape. Even still, he was uncertain and prepared for a trap, but when ordered by his superior, he laid down his rifle, 500 rounds, his ceremonial sword, and sword belt as well as his dagger in its white case, and saluted the flag of his nation. A weeping Onoda surrendered. He wept. After 29 years of absolute certainty, after 29 years of trusting nothing and no one, of reading every leaflet and letter as propaganda, of maintaining his mission against every piece of evidence that it was over, he wept. Because Major Taniguchi did not tell him the war had ended in victory. He told him the truth. Japan had surrendered in August 1945. The mission was over. There was no more war. Onoda emerged from the jungle at age 52, still wearing his old imperial uniform. He was pardoned by then-President Marcos of the Philippines for the crimes committed while he still believed that he was at war. Japan had changed beyond recognition. The country Onoda had left in 1944 was an empire at war, militarized, hierarchical, driven by absolute loyalty to the emperor and the mission. The country he returned to in 1974 was one of the world's leading economic powers, modern, rebuilt, pacifist, transformed. He was welcomed back to Japan as a hero. Parades, diet, crowds, dit, national attention. The government praised his strong will to live and indomitable spirit. But Onoda did not feel like a hero. He felt like a stranger. With Japan now an unrecognizable modern state, Onoda struggled to adapt. A year after his return, he moved to a Japanese colony in São Paulo, Brazil, for a more tranquil life. Think about what he was processing. The war he had fought for 29 years had not only ended, it had ended in complete defeat, almost 3 decades earlier. The empire he had served no longer existed in any meaningful sense. The mission for which he had sacrificed his youth, his comrades, his freedom, it had been pointless, not because he fought badly, but because the entire framework it was built on had collapsed before he even began. And the people he had shot, the Filipino civilians, the farmers and fishermen, they had not been collaborators. They had been innocent people on their own island, killed by a man fighting a war that existed only in his own mind. How do you process that? Onoda spent the rest of his life moving between Brazil and Japan. He married. He ran a ranch. He eventually founded a nature school for Japanese youth, teaching survival skills and self-reliance in the wild. He gave interviews. He wrote a memoir. He said that he did not regret his service, that he had done his duty as he understood it, and that he believed in what he had done. But he also said something else in a 2010 interview when asked about meeting Norio Suzuki for the first time. He called Suzuki this hippie boy who came to the island to listen to the feelings of a Japanese soldier. Not to rescue him, not to end his war, to listen. That is what finally reached Hiroo Onoda. Not official leaflets, not government search parties, not his family's letters or photographs of a rebuilt Japan. A 24-year-old wanderer who went into the jungle, specifically to sit with him and listen. And here is the question. If the goal had been to reach Onoda, not to capture him, not to formally declare him wrong, but simply to reach him as a human being, should someone have done this earlier? Should the first person who went looking for him have been a soldier with a rifle, or a person willing to sit down in the jungle and say, "The emperor and the people of Japan are worried about you"? Would it have worked? We don't know. Onoda might have shot anyone who came before he was ready to hear it. But question matters because Hiroo Onoda's story is not really about a man who was too stubborn to surrender. It is about what happens when training becomes identity, when a mission becomes the entire framework of reality, when the evidence against what you believe is not processed as evidence, but as proof that the enemy is trying to deceive you, when the very mechanism designed to protect you from manipulation becomes the thing trapping you inside a world that no longer exists. Hiroo Onoda died on January 16, 2014, in a Tokyo hospital. He was 91 years old. He had lived long enough to become something rare, a man who survived both his war and the knowledge of what his war had actually been. Norio Suzuki, the man who found him, the adventurer who had gone looking for a Japanese soldier, a panda, and the abominable snowman, died in November 1986 in an avalanche in the Himalaya mountains while searching for the Yeti. He was 37. He had found one of his 3 targets. He never found the other 2. Major Taniguchi, the bookseller who ended a 30-year war with a single order, died in 1997. The war that lasted for Onoda longer than World War II itself had lasted for most of the world. It ended, as all wars eventually do, not with victory, not with defeat, but with a man in a jungle finally hearing words he could believe. Come down from the mountain. The war is over. And the question that stays with you, that you cannot answer cleanly and perhaps should not try to, is how many of us are still fighting wars that ended without us knowing? Not in jungles, not with rifles, but in our minds, in our relationships, in the arguments we keep having with people who stopped engaging years ago, in the grievances we maintain against institutions that have long since changed, in the identities we built around conflicts that resolved while we were still inside them. How long would it take someone to reach you? What would they have to say? Would you believe them?